It's about finding out what gifts you were given and how to use those gifts in the way that you could bring people together so we can all acknowledge what life is all about. Regardless of one's ethnicity or where you're born. But this neighborhood taught me anything. It taught me that we're all brothers and sisters. We are all brothers and sisters. We should realize our roots, but more than the roots, we should realize where the flowers bud. And they bud out in the open air where everybody breathes the same air. And everybody can become open to each other's, tolerant of each other, loving each other, bringing hope, love, and joy to each other. I'm standing here looking at the building I was born right across the street. This particular corner, 187th and Prospect, this particular building was a famous pastry shop called Calavolpi's. And this is where I first probably had my first cannoli, and my father would take me in here and I would go up to the coffee bar and he showed me the places. This is where it all started when I was a little boy. I'm going to walk across the street because this is where we lived. And I'm looking at the building where I was born across the street. 751 East 187th Street. There's that building right there. And I was born on the 5th floor in 1931. It's 85 years ago. My sister Frances was born on the 1st floor 2 years later. But that's the building. I want to go see it. I just want to stand near the entrance, if I may. This is 187th Street, the main drag in the Belmont section here in Italy, the Italian section of the Bronx. This is 751 East 187th Street. There's a number right there in small letters. $7.51. I remember taking my first picture around the corner with a little pony. And I still have the picture. I was about 9 months old. And they have pony rides back in the Depression days. They would come around, and for a nickel you can get your baby, put him on a pony and take a shot. I still have that picture at home. It was taken right here on the corner. And what I remember most about this building is that at a certain age, maybe I was 4 or 5, we moved one building over to 753, which is not there anymore now. It was taken down. There's a senior center there now. But from that building there, we lived on the 3rd floor, and I could hear every sound of the Bronx Zoo, the animals, the lions, the elephants. You could hear it from my bedroom window. Let's take a walk down towards Southern Boulevard. So the second building I lived in was 751. This is an alleyway, but then the building was here. Now it's all been taken down, and they built a center here for senior citizens, which I visited many times to sing my songs. And this is the neighborhood. If we go further down, we would see Southern Boulevard and the Bronx Park. There used to be the building, and then the corner of the building there was Moriello's Bar. Tammy was a neighborhood boxer who fought Joe Louis in 1946 and almost won the fight. And I remember we were listening to that particular broadcast. My father we had everybody up the house, and I was 15 years old and looking out the window, and my father was saying, "Oh wow, Louis is down." And then the next thing, everybody was starting to cheer. We thought we had the world's boxing champion here. And all of a sudden we hear 1, 2, 3. Louis got up and knocked Tammy out. Tammy had jumped out in the first round and knocked him down, but he lost the fight to one of the greatest fighters of all time. But Tammy was a neighborhood boy and a great fighter, and at least he got up to the time. He made it to the championship and fought the champ himself. And when you think about life, it's the trying that counts. So my father would take me for walks to the Bronx Park, and my sister, we'd go to the Bronx Park, and then we go to the Bronx Botanical Gardens. It's all right here in Belmont section. I especially remember the street vendors. Back in those days, in 1931 and during the 30s, the Depression was on in New York, so we had a lot of street vendors coming by in push carts and selling. I remember from my window I could hear, "Imanawang, Imanawang." That was a peddler with his push cart saying, I'm leaving, come and get it now while you can." You know, my mother would come down and get some potatoes or lima beans or corn or peas or whatever they could buy. The knife sharpener would come with his wagon. There would be, the neighborhood was alive with singers and people selling their wares. It was a different world then, different world. And it was all Italian, except for, there was also mixed too. You would have Jewish vendors. We'd had Mr. Brenner and his candy store was around the corner. He used to give me egg creams. Mr. Meza had the grocery store. So there was the Jewish influence too. And there was Mrs. Freeman next door who gave my mother a little 3/4 violin because she knew that I had a certain kind of things. And people would just say hello. And as Jimmy Durante would say, everybody wanted to get into the act. It's a working class neighborhood. Most of the people here were from southern Italy. The big immigration at the time was 2 million Italians from southern Italy came here to the United States of America. My grandfather came here in 1904 and settled here in this particular street of the Bronx around 1907 or 8. My father was born in 1908, right here in the Bronx. He was only, when I was born, he was only 23 years old. He was a young man. My mother was 23, and she was about 11 months older, and we lived right here. And the Montanaros were there, and the Lentinis were on Southern Boulevard, and the people that lived with us in this building were mostly Italian. Across the street there was a gas station, and Morelli's garage was there where all the cars would get in and get fixed. Tony Buffoni's candy store was right there. I would get my first candy shop there, and I'd get my hair cut right next to Tony Buffoni's. This was the street I was born in. This is the street I grew up in. I would play right here in the streets. We'd be playing Ringalivio or kick the can. We would tie up a newspaper and pretend it was a football. Or we'd play against the stoop, and we'd play some stickball too, once in a while, if they were allowed. We weren't allowed to do that. And now the neighborhood is not so much Italian, more Spanish, Mexican. The church, Our Lady of Mount Carmel, is right up the street. And I was there last year and I saw a Mexican family come up asking for the priest's blessing, and I brought tears to my eyes because even though it was Mexican, but still it was reminding me of my grandparents when they first came to the neighborhood and how much the church meant to them. But I grew up here. I remember the Neapolitan language here. So later on in life, when Jane and I went to Italy, she was surprised that I could still speak Italian to the Neapolitans. All of a sudden it came back to me, because I heard that as a child for the first 5 years of my life, all the time. First 10 years, I should say. So from birth till 10, I lived in this neighborhood. Then my father had a job down in D.C. to help build Silver Springs, Maryland. So I spent 2 years in Washington. Of course, I missed the neighborhood. Came back, and I was 12 years old by that time. And I was starting to grow up, and my father said, I want you to take a test for the Bronx High School of Science. And I was lucky enough to pass the test. And that gave me a chance to realize that there's more than just a neighborhood. There's the whole world to try to go out and learn something and be somebody. I didn't know who I wanted to be. I didn't know what I wanted to be. But I did have a strong sense of music and an ability to entertain people. My mother's side were very, very good that way. They're very creative. My father's side were the builders, the craftsmen. So I had a bit of both. And so it wasn't until about 19 years old where I confessed to my parents. I said, I really want to become a singer. And my father was a little disappointed. He wanted me to become a school teacher. But I started out on that journey. And a lot of it was coming from here because as we all know, the Italian language lends itself to operatic music and singing. Yeah. Music is what it's all about. People is what it's all about. So here we are, folks. I'm glad this will be viewed. Best Things NYC, episode number 1, and I'm so honored to talk about New York and my own particular perspective, what it means to me. Here we are in my own neighborhood. We're just going past Hughes Avenue now. After Hughes Avenue, everybody knows is Arthur Avenue. So we moved on from Southern Boulevard, Prospect, Belmont, Crotona, Camberling. Now we're on Hughes Avenue. And this is a very important place because this particular library now, New York Public Library, or the neighborhood library, originally was called Chianese Savoy Theater. And it had broken seats. We used to call it the dumps, but that was a neighborhood. You know, that was, and we were children, we'd come here to see 3 or 4 pictures a day and chapters and everything. And the movies, when I was a child, I think it was 5 cents or 10 cents, I'm trying to remember. But this was where the movie house was. And if you're born here, you remember Chianese? Remember the Savoy? You grew up in the neighborhood?
I don't know. Did they open? I don't know.
Years ago. I remember very well. Chianese Theater, Savoy Theater. It's very nice. And the word joy to me is very important. There were a lot of celebrations going on here in this neighborhood. So St. Anthony, the patron saint, when I was a little baby, my mother would dress me in the Franciscan clothes and we'd take pictures, and I remember that. And we would celebrate. The streets would have, it's going to happen, the San Gennaro Festival, they would put the lights up and everybody would celebrate. And Grandpa, my grandfather Dominic, was the biggest influence in my life with music. He would just sit by the window and sing Neapolitan songs. And I would listen to him. He would celebrate. He never had the chance to go back to Naples and see his own parents. He never saw his mother again. But this is where I became an American. I was born an American, and I realized that I wanted someday to honor my grandparents and my father and mother. And the best way to honor them is to be a good citizen, a good community member, and to bring your family name to mean something to the world. And I'm grateful to God and everybody, because without my family, without this neighborhood, I would never have learned to be honest and real. So I'm very grateful to be born here in Belmont. What more can I say except I thank God I've lived this long to be able to tell the world that it's very important to know your roots and to love your family. I was very lucky to have a loving family. A lot of people are born in today's world and they don't have, sometimes, they weren't lucky enough to have their family living together with them. They're separated. But it doesn't mean that you can't use the phone and use the internet to stay in touch. Stay in touch. But there's nothing like really talking to each other. My father used to say, all right, Dominic, I'm going to say it, that my nickname was Dickie. It doesn't sound very Italian. But there were so many Dominics in the family, they decided to call me Dickie. So Pop would say, Dickie. We're in America now. We shake hands, you know, like John Wayne. I understood that. He wanted to make sure that I got a good start in life. So it took me until I was about 30 years old before I could show my emotions, you know. So you can't be an actor unless you learn how to show your emotions, unless you get to learn the craft of showing those emotions. So Pop was a great influence for me. He taught me about discipline. He was a bricklayer. He would say to me, you see that brick across the house, across the street? I built that house. I used to lay one brick, but lay one at a time and do it right. So I was a bricklayer before I became a student of acting and singing. And it taught me a lot. My mother's side was the joy of singing and the joy of singing and being happy. So I gained a lot. And I thank Mrs. Freeman for giving my mother a little 3/4 violin, which I brought to school. And I remember Mrs. Obadiah, my teacher, said, you have talent, you have talent. She had a long white stick and Well, my father didn't want me to play the violin. He said, you've got to use your brain more. He said, yeah. I think he was protecting me from carrying a violin around, because if I had a violin around, I wasn't, maybe I wouldn't have survived. Maybe somebody would have said, look at that kid, he's playing a violin. But children are funny. They don't realize you can play the violin at any age. So this brings back a lot of wonderful, wonderful memories. 187th Street. The sound of the animals in the Bronx Zoo. I could hear them. I could hear the elephants going, and the lions roaring. You could hear it. And as a child, I could just come down the steps, walk right here, maybe 100 feet, go across the street, then go down toward the entrance, either way, either that way or this way. The main entrance is on Fordham Road. And I would spend hours at 7, 8 years old by myself, feeding the ducks or the deer. I'd spend hours. How lucky I was to have the Bronx Zoo at my doorstep. And then to have such good schools and friends and being grown up in a family like this. 187th Street. If you wanted to go to a restaurant, you went up to Arthur Avenue. It's all part of the same neighborhood. Maybe we should go there now. I've reminisced. I want to go up there now to show you Arthur Avenue, show you the streets where all the neighborhood restaurants are, and where the market is, and where people gathered. When I was a boy, there were push carts all along Arthur Avenue. You could go there to shop. So thanks, Mom, Pop, Grandpa, Grandma. It's a wonderful, and if you look up there, there's Joe's mom and I took a picture here not too long ago. And there's a couple of guys here you may know from the TV show. The great James Gandolfini. And also the cast members are here, and some great actors. Right here on this picture, and there's nothing like Arthur Avenue. It's just wonderful to be here. Also, Mario has a wonderful dining place upstairs. It's like a banquet facilities. It's beautiful. It can hold up any place from 20 to like 150 people. So this is the place to come to on Arthur Avenue. Being here today and talking about our roots, like I mentioned before, it's very important for us to realize that, to me, my philosophy is that life is a progression. It's about learning, constantly learning, never giving up on the idea of learning, and to remember your friends and your family and people who helped you up along the way, because nobody can do it alone. I couldn't have done it without my family. I couldn't have reached this age and been healthy without the support of my family and people like these wonderful people walking around who run the stores, and they're just, it's just a matter of family. It's a feeling of family. But this neighborhood taught me anything. It taught me that we're all brothers and sisters. We are all brothers and sisters.